May thy servant Camilla, who wears this crown, be filled by thine abundant grace.
For 300 years, one principle has governed the British crown. The line of succession does not bend. It does not flex for sentiment, for marriage, for love, for grief. It has survived abdications, scandals, world wars, and the slow collapse of an empire. Every monarch who has sat on that throne has understood one thing above everything else. The line is the institution. Protect the line, and the crown survives anything. King Charles III understood that better than anyone alive. He spent 70 years waiting to be king. 70 years watching the institution, learning it, absorbing every rule it runs on. When the crown finally came to him, in the worst possible circumstances at his mother's deathbed, he knew exactly what it required. He knew the rule. And then, in the early months of 2024, something landed on his desk that told him someone inside his own household had been quietly testing whether that rule could be bent. Not by an outsider, not by a rival, by the person he had fought the entire establishment to be with. King Charles just bent it back, and what he did next has shaken Buckingham Palace to its core. Here are the two facts you need to hold in your head at the same time. Fact 1. Camilla is Queen, crowned at Westminster Abbey, 6th of May 2023. The Archbishop of Canterbury placed Queen Mary's crown on her head in front of 2,000 guests and the watching world. That is documented. That is real. That happened. Fact 2. Her children have no standing in the line of succession. None. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, is not a working royal. She holds no official role. She carries no HRH title. She attends family events, she runs an art gallery in London, and she exists at the precise edge of the most powerful family in Britain without ever being formally inside it. And Charles, this king, this man, has spent years making public commitment after public commitment to a monarchy that gets smaller, not larger. A slimmed-down monarchy. His phrase, his policy. His repeated, documented, on-record position. Queen with children outside the line, a king who promised contraction. Those two facts placed next to each other create a frame. Something happened inside that frame. I'm going to show you exactly what Charles found, what it meant, and what it cost him the moment he decided to act on it. But first, you need to understand the rule he spent his entire life protecting. Because without that rule, none of what he did makes any sense at all. Subscribe before we go any further. You'll want to be here when we get to what was inside that folder. The slimmed-down monarchy is not a recent idea. Charles was making noises about it in the 1990s, long before he was king, long before any of this. The institution was too large, too expensive, too dependent on a sprawling extended family to function cleanly in a modern world. He wanted it leaner, more purposeful. A smaller circle of working royals carrying the weight, with everyone else stepping back. When he became king in September 2022, that vision became policy. The coronation, May 6, 2023, had 2,000 guests. In 1953, Elizabeth II's coronation had 8,000. The message was deliberate. This monarchy would be different, smaller, cleaner, built around a core: Charles and Camilla, William and Catherine, the Princess Royal, the Edinburghs, senior working royals, the documented line. Everyone else, peripheral, non-working, outside the frame. That included Camilla's children. Laura Lopes is 46 years old. She co-founded an art gallery in Belgravia. She married Harry Lopes in 2006. William and Harry were guests at the wedding. She has 3 children, 2 of whom served as pages of honor at their grandmother's coronation. She has spent her entire life one step removed from the most powerful family in Britain. Not a working royal. No succession standing. Her brother Tom has said it plainly. They never really felt like part of the royal family. Always on the side. That was the rule. That was the documented reality of her position. The first reports were easy to dismiss. A Tuesday in late autumn 2023, Laura's name appearing on a scheduling document a preliminary list for a forthcoming ceremonial event. Not confirmed attendance, not an official role, just a name in a column where it had no particular business being. Charles reads everything. That is not a characterization. It is a documented feature of how he works. Briefing papers, schedules, correspondence. He reads it, he notices, he noticed this, but one name on one list is not a pattern. It is a clerical error or an informal suggestion or nothing at all. Charles does not react. He files it somewhere behind his eyes and keeps moving. He has been patient his entire life. Patient through decades of waiting, through years of public hostility, through every installment the institution has asked him to pay. Patience is not a virtue for him. It is a survival skill. Then a second document surfaces. Laura's name again, attached to a proposed ceremonial role for an overseas cultural engagement. A companion role, framed informally. Still nothing confirmed, still nothing official. But now there are two documents, and Charles knows the difference between coincidence and a pattern in its early stages. He keeps reading. He keeps watching. He does not ask questions yet, because a man who asks questions before he has the full picture gives away what he knows too soon.
During his state banquet speech at Windsor Castle, praising her as radiant, healthy, and so beautiful as she sat on his right.
Then the coldest detail arrives. A private secretary, not a junior aide, a private secretary, has been telling advisors that the expansion of Laura's ceremonial presence reflects the king's modern vision for the monarchy. His words, his authority, his name, attached to a direction he never gave. This is the moment the story changes register. Everything before this could be explained as administrative drift, informal suggestion, the natural pull of a mother wanting more for her daughter. Misguided, perhaps. Overreaching, certainly. But explicable. This cannot be explained that way. Someone has been advancing a plan, a deliberate, structured expansion of Laura Lopes's role within the ceremonial machinery of the crown, and using Charles's name to smooth its passage. Not forging documents, not breaking laws, doing something quieter and harder to confront, borrowing his authority in conversations that leave no official record, in rooms he was never in, among people who had no reason to doubt the attribution. The slimmed-down monarchy is Charles's defining institutional commitment. It is the thing he has built his reign around. And someone inside his own household has been using his name to quietly work against it. He goes still when he understands this. Not cold, still. There is a difference. Cold is a reaction. Still is what happens when a man who has spent a lifetime preparing for difficult things finally meets one he didn't see coming. I want to stop here and ask you something. Camilla was trying to secure a future for her daughter, a daughter who has spent her whole life one step removed from the most powerful family in Britain, always present enough to be noticed, never recognized enough to be included. Is that wrong, or is that just a mother? Drop it in the comments. Team Camilla or Team Charles, you, my viewers, are super active. Thanks for being here and supporting. Charles has always been kind to Laura Lopes. That detail matters. This is not a story about a stepfather who kept his distance, who tolerated his wife's children as a condition of the marriage. The documented picture is warmer than that. Laura's sons served as pages of honor at the coronation, a personal choice, Camilla's choice, but one that required the king's sanction. He gave it. Her children were in that abbey because Charles allowed them to be there. He understood her position. A woman who grew up watching her mother become the most controversial figure in Britain, absorbing decades of public hostility, navigating the specific cruelty of being adjacent to an institution that would never fully claim her. Charles had watched Laura carry that with a quietness that he respected, which is what makes the full picture so difficult to process, because the reports that land on his desk in the early weeks of 2024 do not describe a stranger working against him. They describe someone he had welcomed, someone whose children he had placed in his coronation, someone whose mother he had fought the entire world to be with. The betrayal in this story does not arrive loudly. It arrives in documents, in scheduling lists, in the careful, quiet accumulation of a pattern that only becomes visible once you know what you're looking at. Charles knows what he's looking at. The meetings were not in the official palace diary. That is the first thing to understand about what surfaces next. Inside the royal household, the official diary is not a convenience. It is a constitutional instrument. It records what the institution did, when and on whose authority. If a meeting is not in the diary, it did not officially happen. That is not an accident of record keeping. That is a feature of how the palace manages accountability. Camilla's advisors had been meeting, quietly and off the official record, with people whose job it was to manage ceremonial scheduling and personnel protocols. The meetings were small. The attendees were careful. Nothing was committed to formal correspondence. But the pattern is there for anyone who knows where to look. And now, alongside those meetings, a second thread pulls taut, a draft itinerary. Laura Lopes's name, not as a family guest, not as a private attendee, listed in a representational capacity for an overseas cultural engagement. The kind of role that carries the weight of the crown behind it. The kind of role that is constitutionally reserved for senior working royals in the line of succession. Laura Lopes has no succession standing. She is not a working royal. The rules governing that designation are public record. They are not ambiguous. They are not subject to interpretation. Someone knew that. They scheduled her anyway.
I also love this little dig I feel like he took at Prince Harry. No mention of Prince Harry, just glowing about how much he loved the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Before I go any further, I want to know where you stand. Was Camilla protecting her daughter or undermining her husband? Drop it in the comments. I'll read every single one. Charles sits across from Camilla at formal dinners, and his face gives nothing away. That is the most unsettling detail of this entire period. Not the documents, not the meetings, not the draft itinerary. The face. The specific, practiced blankness of a man who has spent 70 years learning how to perform composure in rooms where composure is the only currency that matters. He watches her, the ease of her movements, the way she holds a room. She has always been good at that. Even through the worst years, even when the public hostility was at its most vicious. She smiles. She speaks. She is, to every person in that dining room, exactly what she has always been. Certain of her position, certain of her place. He is gathering. This is not hot anger. Hot anger would be easier, cleaner, something that could be discharged in a single conversation and done with. What Charles is carrying in these weeks is colder and more deliberate than that. It is the specific temperature of a man who has always responded to the most painful things in his life the same way. By going quiet, by going still, by building a complete picture before he moves an inch. He learned that from an institution that has been doing it for 300 years. He is his mother's son, in the end. And his mother never acted until she was certain. Here is where the mainstream reading of this story gets it wrong. The assumption is that using a king's name without permission is an informal thing, a social overstep, a family matter, the kind of internal tension that every large institution manages quietly and moves on from. Nothing legally actionable, nothing constitutionally significant. That framing misses the specific nature of what happened. Charles has built his entire reign around one documented, public, repeatedly stated commitment, the slimmed-down monarchy. This is not a preference, it is policy. It is the organizing principle of everything he has done since September 2022. The smaller coronation, the pruning of HRH titles, the redistribution of patronages, the reduction of the Crown Estate's profit share. Every structural decision he has made as king points in the same direction. And advisors, people operating inside the palace machinery, people whose authority derives entirely from their proximity to the crown, were told that the expansion of Laura Lopes's ceremonial role reflected the king's modern vision. His vision, his words, his policy, inverted and attributed back to him. This is not a social overstep. This is an advisor being asked to act against the king's documented institutional position in the king's name by someone with enough access to make that attribution credible. That is not a family matter. That is institutional deception. And inside the palace, there is no category of action more serious than that. Here is what I need you to answer. right now before you find out what Charles did next. If you discovered that someone you loved had been using your name without asking, would you forgive them? Yes or no? The investigation ends on a Tuesday in early March 2024. This is important to state clearly. No palace investigation of this kind has ever been confirmed publicly. What we can confirm is the framework that would make such an investigation not just plausible, but necessary. A king with a documented institutional commitment. A paper trail of meetings that weren't in the official diary. A draft itinerary with a name that had no business being there. Advisors who had been given an attribution they had no reason to question. The documented facts on either side of what happens next make the shape of it visible. The final report is not long. It doesn't need to be. The paper trail is intact. Copies of scheduling documents, records of the off-diary meetings, the draft itinerary with Laura's name in a column reserved for working royals. The investigators did not need to speculate. Everything that needed to be found had been committed to paper by people who believed they were operating with the king's blessing. They were not. Charles receives the report. He reads it in full, because he always reads everything in full. He sits with it, and then he picks up the phone and makes 2 calls. The first call ends a set of conversations that had been happening without his knowledge. The second call sets in motion something that cannot be undone. The green folder. That is what the people who were in that room will remember. Not the words. The folder. Green. Closed. Sitting on the table between them with the particular weight of something that has already decided the outcome of the conversation before a single word has been spoken. Charles does not raise his voice. That needs to be understood about this moment. There is no shouting, no accusation delivered at volume, no scene. The institution does not do scenes. Charles does not do scenes. He has spent a lifetime absorbing the most painful moments of his existence in near total silence, and this one is no different. He opens the folder. He places the documents on the table, one at a time. The scheduling lists, the off-diary meeting records, the draft itinerary, Laura's name in the column where it should not be, the attribution, the king's modern vision, written in correspondence he never saw, never approved, never sanctioned. Nobody put this conversation on record, but the documented facts on either side of it, what was found and what happened next, make the shape of it visible. Camilla's hands are on the table. At some point they move to her pearl necklace. Her knuckles find the clasp. She does not deny it. She does not explain it away. Her silence in this room is not compliance. It is the specific silence of a woman who understood, the moment that folder appeared, that the conversation she had been avoiding had finally arrived. The warmth is gone from his eyes when he looks at her. Not anger. Something quieter and permanent.
Melania and I are delighted to visit again with Prince William and to see Her Royal Highness, Princess Catherine, so radiant and so healthy, so beautiful.
There is one person outside the palace whose assessment of this institution carries more weight than almost anyone else alive. Robert Lacey has been writing about the British monarchy for 50 years. His book, Battle of Brothers, published in 2020, is the most forensically detailed account of the fracture between William and Harry ever committed to print. He served as the historical consultant to Netflix's The Crown. He has spent decades cultivating access to senior palace sources that no other biographer has matched. Sources inside the household, inside the family, inside the machinery of the firm itself. When Lacey speaks about how this institution operates, he is not speculating from the outside. He is reporting from as close to the inside as any outsider ever gets. And here is where that access becomes a complication. The palace controls what Lacey can verify on the record. His credibility depends on maintaining relationships with the people who grant him access. What he cannot verify is often exactly what matters most. And what he can confirm is therefore more significant than anything an outsider claims, because he has given up the ability to say certain things in order to protect his ability to say anything at all, with that conflict of interest stated clearly. Here is what Lacey has documented on the record. Charles, he has written, had a mildly obsessive desire for a slimmed-down monarchy, not a preference, not a policy position, an obsession. And Lacey has noted that Charles used the 1917 Royal Convention, the mechanism that controls HRH titles, as the specific tool for implementing it. A man with an obsession and a tool. And someone used his name to work against both. 3 counter-arguments exist against this story. They deserve to be heard, and then examined. The first, there is no documented evidence of any secret network, any formal plan, any coordinated effort to expand Laura's role. This is speculation built on internal family dynamics that no outsider can verify. That is technically accurate. Nobody put this in a press release. No palace spokesperson confirmed it. No official record exists. That's exactly the point. The most dangerous moves inside an institution like this are precisely the ones that never make it to paper. The off-diary meetings, the attributed conversations, the scheduling documents that circulate informally before anything is committed to the official record. The slimmed-down monarchy commitment creates the documented frame. Any action expanding the working royal circle runs directly against Charles's public, dated, cited position. The frame is documented. What happened inside it is constructed. But the frame makes the construction necessary, not convenient. The second counter-argument: no palace investigation of this kind has ever been reported by any credible source. This entire internal inquiry is undocumented. Has any of this been officially confirmed? No, and it never will be. That's what you need to understand about how the palace actually works. The institution does not issue press releases about its internal discipline. It issues symbolic acts. And those symbolic acts, the elevation of Catherine, the documented commitment to the succession line, the quiet contraction of the ceremonial circle, are exactly what we're going to show you. The third, crowns are crown estate property. Assigning them for different ceremonial use is routine administration, not a punitive statement. Here's where that reading gets it wrong. Yes, technically, crowns belong to the crown estate. But when a king assigns a coronation crown to his daughter-in-law at the exact moment his wife has lost his trust, that is not administration. That is a message. Charles does not make accidental statements. Every act he makes at this stage of his reign, in uncertain health, with a documented urgency around the succession, is deliberate. Every single one. Picture Charles alone in the vault, white gloves, the crown in his hands, the specific weight of an object that has been the organizing principle of his entire existence. The thing he waited 70 years for, the thing that arrived at his mother's deathbed. The thing that cost him more than any person should reasonably be asked to pay. He did not ask for this crown. He was born into the obligation of it. He spent 7 decades watching it from a distance, preparing for it, being shaped by the institution it represents. And when it finally came to him, it arrived with a cancer diagnosis and a marriage in crisis, and a household that had been quietly working against his most fundamental commitments. That is not triumph. That is the final installment on a life that has asked him to give up everything, over and over, for something that will outlast him by centuries. Hold that image. Hold the weight of it. Because now, hold this. Charles ran what amounts to a surveillance operation against his own wife. He sat across formal dinner tables for weeks, expressionless, composed, performing the warmth of a functioning marriage, while building a case file. He watched her carefully, the ease of her movements, the certainty of her smile. And he was cold, deliberate, methodical. A man who once fought the entire British establishment to marry the woman he loved, who absorbed 30 years of public hostility to be with her, turned that marriage into an investigation. He treated her as a subject of inquiry. That is the condemned moment. It does not disappear just because his reasons were legitimate. The coldness of it is real, and it matters. Find the photographs of Laura as a child. She is always slightly apart, never quite inside the frame. present at the edge of images that are fundamentally about other people, other relationships, other inheritances. A girl growing up watching her mother become the most controversial woman in Britain, absorbing the specific cruelty of that proximity without any of its protection. No title, no status, no institutional claim on the family that was consuming her mother's life and, by extension, hers. Penny Junor has documented how Camilla shielded her children from the media in the 1990s, especially after the 1993 phone leak, when the full weight of public hostility descended on everything connected to her name. Laura grew up inside that shelter, which means she also grew up understanding exactly what it cost to be adjacent to the crown without belonging to it. Tom Parker Bowles said it plainly. They never really felt like part of the royal family. Always on the side. That is not bitterness. That is the documented reality of Laura's entire life. Camilla watched that. For decades, she watched her daughter exist at the precise margin of an institution that would claim her grandchildren as pages of honor, and then return them to the margins when the ceremony was over. What she did came from that place. The human truth of it is real, and it deserves to be felt before it is judged. Now judge it. She told advisors that the expansion of Laura's role reflected the king's modern vision. She used Charles's name to advance a plan he knew nothing about. She borrowed his authority, the specific authority of a king who had spent his entire reign building a documented commitment to contraction, and spent it without asking. That is not mother's instinct. That is appropriation. The distinction matters. Catherine knew exactly what it meant to be standing in that ceremony. She is not a passive figure in this story. She is too intelligent, too carefully positioned, too forensically aware of the institutional dynamics around her to have been unaware of what was happening inside the household. Royal experts have described her as a healing balm for this family. They credit her with mending the relationship between Charles and William. She understands the machinery of the firm better than almost anyone who has entered it by marriage. She accepted the crown anyway, not because she wanted it in that moment. The specific weight of receiving something at another woman's expense is not a comfortable thing. And Catherine is not a woman who is comfortable with discomfort. She accepted it because the institution required forward movement regardless of the personal cost to anyone in that room. She did not look at Camilla. She looked at William. That composure is not coldness. It is the specific weight of knowing your role and carrying it anyway, whatever it costs the person standing nearest to you. Hold that sympathetic read. Now hold this. The palace is not large enough for a conflict of this magnitude to go unnoticed by the future queen consort. What did Catherine know about what was happening, and when did she know it? Her composure throughout, the steadiness, the careful positioning, the quiet accumulation of honours and responsibilities in this exact period could be read as the strength of a woman focused entirely on her role. It could also be read as the calculated stillness of a woman who understood which way the institution was moving and chose to let it move without intervening. The question is worth asking. The answer is not available. Laura Lopez did not choose any of this. She did not choose to be Camilla's daughter. She did not choose to spend her life at the precise margin of the most watched institution in the world, present enough to be photographed, never recognized enough to be included. She did not choose the specific cruelty of watching her own children placed at the center of a coronation and then returned to the margins when the ceremony ended. The human truth of her position is documented and real. Her brother said it. The biographers confirm it. Adjacency without belonging. That is the specific phrase, and it is exact. What the constructed record shows is this. Her name appeared on scheduling documents where it had no business being. She attended meetings she should not have attended. The draft itinerary placed her in a representational capacity that is constitutionally reserved for senior working royals in the line of succession. She was present when she should not have been. That is what the record shows. Whether she understood the full weight of what her presence represented, whether she knew that her name on those lists was being advanced in her stepfather's name without his knowledge, that question does not have a documented answer. Agent 3 will not construct one. What can be said is this: she was not a passive recipient of her mother's ambition. She was in the room. Her name was on the paper. The investigation found her there. The rest is a question she has never been asked publicly and may never be. Here is the narrator's position, stated once. Camilla Parker Bowles spent 30 years being the most hated woman in Britain. She absorbed that hostility with a composure that, whatever you think of her, was genuinely extraordinary. She waited. She outlasted. She became queen. And then she spent some of what that cost. Not carelessly, not maliciously. With the specific logic of a mother who understood, better than anyone alive, what it meant to be kept at the margin of an institution that would use you without claiming you. She looked at her daughter's life and she decided to do something about it. The instinct is human. The method was a betrayal. She used a man's name, a man who had given her everything, who had paid a price for her that most people will never be asked to pay for anyone, without asking him. In an institution where a man's name is not just his identity, but his constitutional authority, that is not a small thing. Charles's response was cold, methodical, and entirely consistent with every documented commitment he has ever made. It was also, in its coldness, a portrait of what this marriage has become. Two people who understand the institution better than they understand each other anymore, moving through the same rooms with the careful precision of people who have stopped assuming they know what the other one is thinking. That is not a verdict on whether the marriage survives. Marriages absorb things that would destroy most people. It is a verdict on what was lost in that green folder, something that had survived 30 years of everything else, and did not survive this. Here is what's strange about this story. Everyone who covers it focuses on the crown. Which crown? Whose hands? What it means for the succession? And those are real questions. They matter institutionally, they matter constitutionally. But that's not actually what happened here. What happened here is older than any of that. A man spent 30 years fighting the entire establishment to be with the woman he loved. He absorbed the criticism, he outlasted the hostility. He watched the institution resist her, and then, slowly, painfully, accept her. He gave her his name, his protection, his public defense. He made her queen. And then he found out that somewhere along the way, she had been quietly spending his authority on something he hadn't agreed to. The crown in this story is not the subject, it's the receipt. It's the documented record of what Charles decided to do the moment he understood what had been done in his name, and what it cost him to do it. A king in uncertain health, setting his house in order, choosing the institution over the person he loves. That is not triumph. There is no version of that story that feels like winning. You've seen this before, not in palaces, in kitchens, in offices, in the quiet moment when you realize someone you trusted made a decision that was yours to make and didn't ask. The scale is different. The institution is different. The stakes are incomprehensible to most people who will never hold a crown or defend a succession line. But the feeling at the center of it, that specific coldness of discovering that someone used your name, your silence, your protection, as raw material for something you never sanctioned, that is not a royal feeling. That is a human one. What do you do when the person you gave your entire life to spent some of it without asking? Charles's answer is documented. It is written in the institutional record, in the symbolic acts of a king who does nothing by accident, in the quiet elevation of a daughter-in-law he calls beloved while his marriage absorbs a damage that will never fully be named in public. That is his answer. It doesn't look like justice. It doesn't look like revenge. It looks like a man who has spent a lifetime choosing duty over everything else, choosing it one more time at the highest possible personal cost. One question before you go. Was Camilla protecting her daughter or betraying her husband?